You know what is wrong with South Africa? The problem is that no one is in charge. Everything is someone else's responsibility to resolve or to fix. Politicians speak as if they're not responsible. Citizens speak as if they're not responsible for voting these people in. And thus no one is responsible. No one is there to fix it because no one is in charge. This is something that occurs at many levels and in different fields in our country. However, I'm going to highlight 5 things which I believe are the trenches of the foundation of a healthy and prosperous society, unlike what we have here in South Africa. In my considered view, these 5 positions, should be filled by men, because men are the natural leaders of life. A society or group of people led by women will end up forever in villages or large squatter camps or informal settlements, as people like to call it today. That is where female leadership gets you, in a chaotic, circular, and dysfunctional society of poverty. In other words, a weak society going nowhere. Thus, as I lay out my argument, you may do well to assume that I mean men in these positions of leadership that will move South Africa forward. So do you know what is wrong with South Africa? No one is in charge is my contention. And where people should be in charge, our most competent and committed men should be the people in those positions. I will highlight 5 areas: the presidency, the policeman, the patriarch, the pastor, and lastly, the principal, as in a school principal. So, number 1, the president. Why does the South African president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, always look tired, bored, and uninspired, as if someone is forcing him to be there? Why doesn't this coward just quit? It is not like he hasn't already tried when those US dollars were found in his sofa at the Phala Phala farm. This man wanted to run away. This coward wanted to resign. However, the story goes that the fat gutter troll Gwede Mantashe convinced him not to. I wish the president would run away. I wish he would quit, because the man is useless. President Ramaphosa takes every chance not to be in charge. When asked to fix the country, he says he wants to make sure that the ANC does not fall apart first. His actions say that he puts the ANC before South Africa, that he only cares about himself and the ANC and not South Africa and South Africans. You peasants can see to finish. Yet in exuberance, he jumps in front of the Springboks to celebrate the World Cup win that they won for the country and not for the ANC, to try and somehow mask how absolutely useless he and the ANC are. The president is a fool. President Ramaphosa is not a man who has taken responsibility or taken charge. If he is in charge, why does he never act? Why does he allow the country to crumble right in front of his eyes? We can all see it. No one is denying it. He's not even denying it anymore. He's trying to paper over with stories of Tintswalo or anyone else he can find to try and make, I don't know who he thinks, but someone believe that the ANC is still holding this place together. The country's falling apart. You know it, we know it, Mr. President. When he has the power and willingness of the citizens behind him to say that someone should do something, change it, Mr. President, he still does nothing. He has the willingness and the power of the citizens behind him. People want the change. People want him to do something. People want him to fix South Africa. He doesn't. Other than that, why is the man even there? He hides in the collective safety of the ANC. He hides behind the yellow, black, and green flag that has come to represent corruption and incompetence. And he's right there as number 1, corrupted and incompetent. If he is the president, he has to have some sort of standards, doesn't he? But the man doesn't. He's the one involved in the Phala Phala farm scandal, where he's hiding US dollars in his sofas and running around trying to cover it up. This man is a joke. If he is the president, why doesn't he have the standard that says this is how a citizen of the country should be? An honest, hard-working person, which he is not. The man is a coward. What consequences can anyone who works under him in the ANC or in the government what consequences can they really expect if they're corrupt and incompetent? They can't, because what consequences has a president met for being an incompetent, corrupted person? Can a local councillor or mayor or premier or anyone else for that matter be held to any standard of honesty, integrity and hard work? They cannot, because not even the president is held to that standard. Even unelected public officials going about their job for the government or some government department can be corrupt and incompetent, and many have been and many are to this day. And nothing can be done, or nothing is done, because it starts right from the top with President Ramaphosa, number one corrupt, number one incompetent of the South African government and the ANC. With this man, who is supposed to be in charge, doing that, what is a government official who doesn't want to be full of integrity or full of honesty, what is that person going to choose? He's going to choose to follow the president, corrupt and incompetent. He's not, in fact, a person we can trust to lead a country or lead anything. I wouldn't trust that guy to lead me out of a paper bag. He, in fact, is a person who looks tired, bored, and uninspired every time you see him on camera. What could such a sorry loser be in charge of, actually? Who can he lead? What kind of person can be led by such a sorry, weak man? A coward who doesn't care about his country and only cares about his pockets and his friends. He is surrounded by equally uninspiring people, actually, when you think about it, in the form of a deputy president called Paul Mashatile, a man so fake and uninspiring. Listening to him is basically getting an ear infection. Paul Mashatile, whose blue light security team accosted two men in broad daylight on a national highway in traffic, guns down, who pointed at these people, and they lied about it. They said that, no, Mr. Mashatile didn't do this, he wasn't even present, it was his security team. It turns out he was there, just in another vehicle in that line of blue light vehicles. This is the sort of man who doesn't care about citizens, Paul Mashatile, just like his president. To tell the truth, even if he was not there, why would that security team still act like that? Why would they misuse their power in such a dangerous, reckless, and obviously tyrannical way? Why would that team act that way at all, especially when they are the team of Paul Mashatile? Shouldn't they be one of the most responsible, well-trained security teams that treat citizens with the appropriate amount of force and order, instead of beating citizens in broad daylight on a public highway? This is the sort of thing that happens in dictatorships. The president and his men, Mashatile, Fikile Mbalula, Zweli Mkhize, remember him, and other unimpressive people like that, with well-paying jobs that put a lot of responsibility on the person in that position, are weak cowards, corrupted and incompetent. Yet these men are in line, a very long line of unimpressive people that work for our government and the ANC, and they work under this stupid president, a loser. Fikile Mbalula, have you ever seen this guy? Who can follow a guy like that? Where can that guy even lead you? To where? To what? A person like that lead a country? Who can follow Fikile Mbalula? My friends, no one is in charge, because all the things that need to be fixed in this country can be fixed, actually. There is no problem so big in South Africa that it can't be fixed. But with people like Fikile Mbalula, Paul Mashatile, and our president, who do you think is going to fix them? Not these men. Our politicians, starting of course with the president, seem dead set on doing none of it. Closing the border, not a chance. How about making hospitals functional? For who? For what? Why? Potholes? Fill the potholes? No need. They don't bother politicians. Those potholes bother you, the peasants, the citizens running around in your little cars without blue light brigades following you. If a citizen dares to ask why the politicians have not done something, they are shouted down, like when Ian Cameron was shouted at by Minister of Police Bheki Cele at a community meeting held to discuss various crime issues. Cele told Cameron to shut up, in other words, to shut up. He did not, and the community agreed with Ian Cameron, actually. Cameron, of course, thrown out of that meeting by the minister and by police. When it eventually resulted in Parliament asking Cele to apologize, he said this sanction by Parliament was laughable. That's how he thinks of South African citizens, and he actually challenged that ruling by Parliament. Cele is supposed to be fighting crime. He seems more interested in fighting his way to the nearest news camera. That is where he likes to be, not in an office or on the road fighting crime and organizing the police of this country. All while South Africa is the 5th most dangerous country in the world, according to the crime index of 2014 to 2024. Add to that a murder rate equal or more than that of a war zone. The crime statistics indicate that despite Minister Cele's populist rhetoric, 6,945 people were murdered between July and September in 2023 alone, or roughly 77 people every single day. Citizens of South Africa murdered. Bheki Cele is so concerned with shouting down Ian Cameron. That is because no one is in charge. My point is that the president is not in charge. He actively does nothing and tries to avoid doing anything. Thus, politicians and people who work for the government can also get away with doing nothing because no one is in charge. Which brings me to the second point, the policemen. The policemen of this country are under pressure. The national police to population ratio of 1 officer to every 413 residents is where we stand. In a group of 413 residents, you're bound to find at least one criminal, right? What if then, in your country or in your society, there is a culture of corruption that has been established? A culture of bribing traffic officers and officials at government offices, a culture of jobs for money schemes and internet scams that provide fake education qualifications, this sort of thing. A culture when even the ordinary citizen may have to bribe someone to get something done. Then you have a society where no one is in charge, my friend, where each one does what they want and does what they have to do to get ahead. It is not the rule of law that organizes the country because no one is enforcing the law at a high enough level to keep order. People understand that they can get away with doing something illegal in that sort of society. It is a rule of man and not of law. Each man is his own law, thus everyone can do as they please. From people who bribe to get big tenders to construction intimidation rings, call them the construction mafia if you want. This is a crazy place where anyone does whatever they want. A crazy place where people are threatened at a construction site is crazy. When they're trying to build some sort of mall, they can be threatened and beaten, workers taken off the site, buildings stopped because someone wants a bribe, wants money in a project they're not even involved in. They'll burn your equipment, they'll stop work by sabotaging your equipment, they'll intimidate your workers with violence. This is the country we live in, where the policemen who are meant to be in charge to investigate and to arrest, the men who are meant to be the watchers at the wall. If no one is in charge, anyone can rush over that wall and do whatever they want. No one is coming to get you when you commit a crime. That is the message we're sending here. There are people who think they can get away with all sorts of crimes, so they do. Things like cash and transit heist, cable theft, and anything else some twisted mind can devise because no one is coming to get them. Plus, if they do come to get you, nothing a quick bribe can't fix. In a society where no one is in charge, bribes will be paid because often that is all you need. The policemen themselves are criminals. He is asking for a bribe in exchange for your freedom or instead of punishing you. What won't people do in a society like that? If there is no law for the criminals, in truth, there is no law for even the citizen. If he wants to get anything done, he might have to commit a crime because the policemen are also criminals. If there's no law for the criminals, there's no law for anyone. If no one is in charge, There are no rules and there is no punishment. If you break the rules, then bribes become the rule. They become the way to get things done. They have taken over what used to be a rule of law. They're a rule of man, and anyone can do whatever they want. Corruption becomes a culture. Our police are not there to uphold the law, it seems. As a citizen, you would rather avoid them as well. You want to avoid the criminals and you want to avoid the police, because interacting with both of them may end up with bad consequences for you. They are both very unpleasant. Criminals love the power of getting over on people, whether by trickery or violence. Unfortunately, many of our police officers are the same, and both groupings love money over loving what is right. People who love what is right build a great society. People who love money, well, anything goes in that society. All sorts of evil can be perpetrated in that sort of society. They often work together, the police and the criminals in this country. 3,981 police officers were arrested for various crimes in 2019 alone, and most were still employed by the South African Police Service in that year. I'm not saying that we are all a bunch of dirty, rotten criminals now as a society. What I'm saying is that when there is no one in charge, a society becomes lawless. South Africa has in many ways become a lawless country. Look at the sort of crimes that go on. Someone has to be in charge, and it looks like no one is in charge currently. And if a person were to defend Begipele, a man like that inspires no confidence in any of us. We feel unsafe when you see him. You're like, yeah, we're in trouble. No one is in charge if this is the guy that's supposed to be standing up for us. When the only thing standing between us and the criminals is a man like Begipele. And it is similar when you come to our homes. It starts right at the top of the home with the patriarchs. But before we talk about that, let me tell you about our course that you can get access to when you buy us a coffee on our Buy Me a Coffee page. If you go over to our Buy Me a Coffee page and you buy us a coffee, the link is in the description. You'll get access to our course, and with that course, you'll get access to more exclusive content to come in the future. However, if you go to the Buy Me a Coffee page and become a member, you get access to the course and you'll get a digital comic book emailed to you every month. The digital comic book is inspired by certain South African political stories and news stories. And if you can't buy us a coffee or become a member, you can just join our mailing list, also in the description, and you'll get one digital comic book emailed to you. All right, back to the podcast. Point 3, the patriarch. I believe in societies that are governed the right way, and there is only one correct way that I have ever seen: the rule of the father, otherwise known as patriarchy. That's why I don't see why we need female police officers or soldiers, to name just those two occupations. South African families, especially the black family, suffers from a desperate lack of fathers. 70% of black children in South Africa do not live with their fathers, which means they most likely stay in a house led by a woman, usually a grandmother or a mother. Stepdads and boyfriends cannot replace biological fathers, even if they are good men, which many are not. Plus, the child themselves may not like the man, which is difficult both for the man who's coming in as a boyfriend or a stepfather and for the kid as well. That is before we consider abuse committed by mom's boyfriend and stepdads and by moms themselves. Moms are the biggest abusers of children. No one ever talks about that. It's always easier to point out the men. However, that is a discussion for another day. What I am here and concerned with is the destruction, the utter destruction of the South African home. The thing that is destroying it, which is the worst among black citizens actually and black families, is single mothers. As we know, these people, these single mothers, produce nearly all the criminals, drug addicts, and the least productive people in our society. Homes led by women are literally a formula for a failed society. So the ANC offering women a marriage to the government instead of a marriage to a man in the form of what they call a social grant is a policy that destroys society. This society destroying policy is an attempt to replace the father, and that can't be done. When you try to replace the father, you destroy the home. Replacing father with government and giving the child a reckless mother who had a baby for some emotional reason, plus the 500 rand she's going to get from the government every month, is a factory of dysfunction. That's how you bring down a society. And the ANC loves a factory of dysfunction. That suits them just fine. They thrive in dysfunction. In this scenario, it is the government and women in charge of families. That's a bad combination, which is to say, there is no one in charge. If the government and women are in charge of our homes, no one is in charge of them. Society and people are going nowhere. The correct model is actually patriarchy. A system of society or government in which the father or eldest male is head of the family and descent is reckoned through the male line. This is the only and best way to build a society and to build a home, as the father at the head of that household. The healthiest families in our society are organized in that way, and so are the healthiest groupings in South Africa, which I would say are the whites and the Indians. These people have the most fathers actually. 80% of their homes have fathers in them. No father dysfunction. That's how you build a good society. However, when you have 30% of black children who live with their father, what's happening to the other 70%? Most of them are causing havoc and are being the least productive people in our society. That's what's happening. That leaves way too many people under the roof of a woman being led in the home by their mom. Not a good combination, which means our problem in society is starting right from the home. Men need to be in charge of homes. It is the only way to build great families, and great families build great societies. Black men do not rule their home because they've been replaced now by the social grant, by the government. Their child belongs to the government and their woman is married to the government. This is not a very good plan for the blacks. This is not a very good plan for our society. The woman now has more allegiance to the government and that 500 rand that keeps her home afloat than she ever does to her man. That puts her children not in a good place. Those children without fathers are at a vast disadvantage compared to those with fathers. If the black man, or so many black men, don't rule their home, it means that the woman's plan was never to have the man as her husband in the home. She always planned to replace him with the government to get the grant. The two parents of a child in 70% of South African homes have never been together actually, as in living in a family and married, not just dating, not just socializing together or trying to co-parent as people call it. I'm talking about in a home building a family. They've just never done that, and that leaves the child in perpetual poverty actually, because that's who is in the most poverty, these children being raised by single mothers, and they are hopelessly ill-prepared for the world because they were raised in a household with no dad. Prison is most likely their future, more than something great. When prison and other negative outcomes are what millions of black children have to look forward to, is it any wonder that black groupings or the black grouping in South Africa, in the South African society, is so dysfunctional and problematic? A lack of patriarchs means no one is in charge because the man is actually supposed to be in charge of his woman and children. When children are raised by women and families are run by women, no one is in charge. And when no one is in charge, lawlessness takes over, meaning no one is in charge. Because lawlessness is anyone can do whatever they want and anything goes. And what do you see in black communities, especially the poor ones, where there are no fathers? Anything goes and anyone can do whatever they want, and the women and children are in the most danger actually. That is why so many run to the church. That is why so many single women and women in general are in the church. Which brings us to point 4. The pastor. This position has been degraded more than most others in South African society. The word pastor itself brings up images of fraudsters, scammers, and bushiri, but I repeat myself. These men and some women, yet another occupation not suitable for women, these fake pastors and women who call themselves such are no moral example or ethical example. Neither do they teach the Bible, choosing rather their own words or a twisted version of the word. A healthy society is made up of a moral and religious people. In South Africa, we have corrupted the religion, so the people are morally malformed. They do not function well enough to have a good society, and the pastors, so-called, are not standing up or saying stop. These men and women who play pastors have turned the church into a business and the people into merchandise, teaching their own doctrines, and many involved in the occult, by the way, with their secret rituals while calling themselves pastors and Christians. They victimize the people and spend their money on material things. Who can trust these people? Who can believe a word out of their mouth? No one is in charge at these churches because they have become money-making buildings and not places of learning how to live by the way of God. No one is in charge because instead of looking at a person's character, they look at what they can get out of them. Jesus Christ is no longer the head of this so-called church. He is hardly even mentioned in there. It is just about what this narcissistic so-called pastor wants to do. These places are run by effeminate, oversexed scammers in suits, many of them foreign, who have come to South Africa not as missionaries of God, rather as people looking for a business opportunity or criminals looking for a new territory. No one is in charge in many of our churches because many are not churches at all. They only carry the look and not the reality. No one is in charge because they are fake, and the so-called pastors are fake. They are dysfunctional cults of personality, where the person calling themselves the man of God or the woman of God, one wonders which God they're talking about. The person calling themselves the man or the woman of God runs around only to make money for themselves and live out their goals of being rich and in power. This is not a church. Thus I say no one is in charge because instead of leading people to God and to a moral life, they are leading them to themselves, which is no place at all, which is not what a real church does. No one is in charge and these scammers run wild. And who do you think these fake pastors take advantage of the most? Of course, single women, single mothers, and women in general. They then take these teachings, these mothers do, that they learn in these fake churches. They take these teachings of devils and bring them into their house where there is no man to say stop. And they try to lead that house with no man around, furthering the falsehoods of fake pastors. Truly, no one is in charge. Before we go to our last point, don't forget to check the description to buy us a coffee and get access to our course. And if you become a member, you get the course and a digital comic book every month. And if you can't buy us a coffee, check out our emailing list and you'll get one digital comic book. All right, last point, the principle. This is the last of our 5 men. And I believe men should be in these positions, because where men are in charge, a society can move forward because men move the world forward. The principal is in charge of our schools. It's simple. Most of our schools, the ones where most of the black children are, have fallen apart. They're not very good schools at all. The schools are run badly and many have become violent daycare centers. 8 out of 10 South African school children struggle to read by the age of 10. South Africa ranked last out of 57 countries assessed in the Progress of International Leading Literacy Study, which tested the reading ability of 400,000 students globally in 2021. It is not just that the education is bad, which it is. Many schools in South Africa are just dysfunctional and don't work at all. That's why I call them giant daycare centers. It is that the socialization that is meant to take place in the form of building a well-educated, productive citizen who can move through the world effectively. They can actually be someone who can handle it and compete with people from all over the world. We're just not producing people like that. School principals often use schools as their own business and use school resources to achieve something that they want to achieve and not something that should be achieved for the children. This is the person meant to be in charge of educating and caring about young citizens. Schools are producing low-quality people who are not ready for the world. The school principal is satisfied with the low standards, and so is our government, to the point where when a so-called poor school does well in South Africa, it makes the news, and the principal of that school is interviewed, rightly so, because they have probably had to overcome a lot of government incompetence to get those results with fewer resources and in a dysfunctional community full of single mothers. Many of our school principals are just not effective enough, no matter the challenges they face. Yes, the government does not care about the children and seeks to make it as difficult as possible for that school and to keep our children dumb. On the other hand, our principals are not resourceful enough to face such a blatant, incompetent government. Many do not go far enough to sort their school out themselves. In what separates a good school from a bad school is how active the principal, the governing body, and the teachers are. Many of our school principals are not mobilizing as the leader, as the head of that school, mobilizing their teachers and the parents to get the school moving forward. They just like the office and being the principal. The government is not in that school with those children day to day, but that principal is. Why isn't he saying, I will turn this school into the best school that I possibly can, no matter where the school is and no matter who the kids in the school are? Why aren't the principals more proactive? A real person in the form of a school principal is right there every single day with those children. Why isn't he setting the goals and strategies for that school instead of waiting for the education department to do something? Schools, like much of South African society, have become far too effeminate. They're being led by women. Every teacher is a woman, and we are not getting our children off to the right start. We have made them emotional, violent people instead of competent, logical, productive people. It is obvious that we need more men in our schools, especially in the bad schools, in our classrooms and as school principals, to build great schools that produce high-quality young South Africans who are a credit to their family, to their school, and to their country. The point is that South Africa needs men of integrity, talent, and competence in these 5 areas: as president, as policeman and the head of police, as the patriarch in the home, as the father leading his own home, as true and committed pastors, real churches being run, not fake ones, and as school principals that have goals and strategies to make their school great, no matter how many resources they have or do not have. These positions should be filled with men, and we should encourage a patriarchal structure where men, the natural leaders of life, lead in government positions, in police and the military service, as heads of their households, as leaders of churches, not women as pastors. That's just not biblical. And lastly, as heads of schools. We are to rebuild high-functioning societies with these 5 areas, and they must be rightly occupied and headed up by the most competent of our men. I recommend South African society returns to patriarchy in every way we can, because it works. And only then will we see a culture of people taking charge and responsibility. I have found it to be true that as the men go, so goes the nation. Men take charge and do what is right in these 5 areas, and we will begin to see our country reawaken. South Africa sucks because no one is in charge. We fix that and adopt male leadership, a patriarchal culture, and our nation will thrive. Don't forget to check out our links in the description box. Thank you. I look forward to hearing from you.